Welcome to the From Concealment Podcast, the show for firearm enthusiasts who like to shoot, train, carry, and compete. Get ready for some shooting and sight, firearm and accessory reviews, and of course, insight on conceal carry. And now, broadcasting from behind enemy lines in the From Concealment studio, it's Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams.
Hey, Freedom Nation, this is Pete Mitchell.
And I am Dan Sams.
And I tell you, man, every week it seems like a year is taking place as far as what's going on in the world.
I know, man. I know, especially gun related, brother.
Yeah. Not only that, but you know what I found interesting? All these states that are losing representatives, California and New York being like, what? How could we lose a representative?
Oh, yeah.
And
I love
everyone's leaving your state, but Ohio is losing a rep too.
Yeah.
West Virginia losing a rep,
that's a little bit surprising because West Virginia honestly was already so small, and I don't know. It's interesting to me. We'll see what happens with that.
But I find it funny that they're like really pissed because New York lost a rep by 86 people. So, you know, they're going to be sitting there going, well, if we could have counted all the illegals, we would still have, we would have picked up a seat, I'm sure.
Maybe if you hadn't killed all the people in the nursing homes.
Oh, well, who knows? Were they counted before or after?
Yeah. Well, their votes counted after.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, my grandparents voted straight Republican until the day they died. And then it was Democrat from then on.
Yep. That's exactly how it goes. Do you see where in Arizona that they're planning? I mean, if everything goes through, they're planning to recheck something like 200,000 votes in Arizona, and because they're questionable. But Biden only won by something like 20,000 there. Yeah. So what they're checking is so far beyond the margin of error. So I'm starting to wonder, like, now they're not going to let it happen, but like, what would happen if we get everything checked and it's like, oh yeah, Biden didn't win? What happens? Obviously, they're not going to let that happen.
They already inaugurated him. It's over.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting how all this goes down?
And then the fact checkers are out like crazy going, no, this is not what's happening. I mean, like left and right, the fact checkers. I mean, that kind of tells you right there everything you need to know about what's really going on.
Oh, man, yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like the vaccine. If it was real, first of all, science is not a fact. Science is the search for truth, right? I mean, that's the whole idea behind science. And in science, you question everything and you test it and you verify over and over and over again. There is no such thing as settled science, right? That's not what science is.
Using that language is a clear indicator. Saying, oh, the science is settled is a clear indicator that something other than science is going on.
Exactly. Right? That it's belief, that it's now religion.
Yeah. Well, we call it scientism. And that's legitimately or illegitimately rather, scientism is a religious belief, not a scientific belief.
Right. And most people who who would subscribe to the scientism belief don't realize that it's actually a belief system. Yep. They believe it's this is what fact is, and it's unfortunately not the case.
Well, have you seen the meme? And it's a painting of I think is it Copernicus being burned at the stake, and it says he didn't trust the science.
Oh no!
I think is it Copernicus? I forget who it was. It was one of those that believed that in a heliocentric solar system, and I think it was Copernicus that they were talking about that, and I just thought that was hilarious. But yeah,
what I thought was the funniest thing is the meme I posted in the Telegram group, and then you had gone on to post the exact same meme.
Immediately, I jump on it. I'm like, oh my gosh!
Yeah, so it's Matthew McConaughey smoking a cigarette. I can't remember what movie that's from, where he looks all, it might be from True Detective, because he looks all disheveled. And it's 2022. You smoke your last Newport in front of your drill press. You hear a loud bang at the front door. They know you're not vaccinated. To me, that was just absolute comedy.
It was brilliant.
Because there's so many people who are on my Facebook feed who have no idea what being in front of your drill press means. And they're probably looking at this going, okay, yeah, I heard Biden just banned Newports. Well, basically menthol cigarettes, which is Newports,
Yes.
And
which, by the way, is an attack on urban communities. Like,
you think?
I think so. So, like, the only people I know that smoke Newports are honestly like urban people in urban communities and the old ladies that were reception at the lottery commission building that I worked at. Like, that was who I knew that smoked Newports. That was, I don't know, maybe somebody else does, but
all I can say is, first of all, where does this government get off thinking they can tell people what they can and can't do? First of all, let me just say, I believe that smoking is bad for your health.
yes.
Now, I mean, the science is questionable. No, actually, I mean, but that's my personal belief. I also believe you got the right to do something stupid if you want. I mean, if you want to do that, go for it. Well, I think it's a bad decision, but whatever.
But it's up to you, man. Yeah, our government's job. Well, and of all the things they could be dealing with right now, they choose that. They're going to ban menthol cigarettes.
No,
crying out loud. Like, literally, nobody has come to justice over the Epstein stuff. Nobody. 0 people have come to justice. Absolutely freaking 0. But you want to deal with menthol cigarettes? Like, seriously? Like, I want to look and be like, screw you guys. Like, I want to say stronger language than that, but I am going to talk about.
Honestly, I'm the type of guy that wants to go out and get a couple of cartons of Newports and just like find a TV camera and start smoking them, but I don't smoke. So,
well, no. Have you seen the meme where it's like some people are investing in Bitcoin, some people are investing in the market, and then it's like me, an intellectual, and it's like cases of Newports.
Oh, they're going to be worth some money, man. They're going to be worth some money.
It crossed my mind to be like, maybe I should invest. Maybe I should buy some Newports. And I'm like, well, I don't really want to take part in like facilitating like an unhealthy habit, but it can make you some money, I think.
Well, but that's the whole thing, right? Because then the government would say, well, now you're illegally selling cigarettes. And then they're going to arrest you.
Worth more on the black market.
Dude, I'm telling you, man. I'm like, every time I look at this government, I'm like, I can't believe what's going on. And it's funny because I was thinking about this morning. All right. My wife, when we got married, she was Lutheran. And yeah, so I went to her church a few times. And I don't know that I ever said this to her when we were dating. I probably said it afterwards. But I was like, dude, Lutheran is Catholic light. I mean, that's what Lutheran is.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this morning. Okay, Democrats are communists. Republicans are communist light. They're still all communists.
Yeah. Well, it's still so much socialism at this point. The way our government is running, it's just what degree of socialist are they? Because man, they ran anybody resembling libertarian out of there a long time ago. I mean, closest we got is maybe Rand Paul, and even he doesn't measure up to his dad. And I don't know if you've ever heard Rand Paul's speech when he was leaving the Senate, where he basically was like, "Shame on all of you, you suck, you're really terrible." His farewell speech to the Senate it's beautiful.
Really?
And he basically is like, I've done everything I can for 30 years. And he's like, everything, you've gone the exact wrong way. And I'm giving up. And he says it in a much more sophisticated way, but yeah, man. So that's what a time, man. So yeah, they're banning Newports, crazy stuff's going on. Oh, and then we were talking about right before we got on here, the Supreme Court is not going to pick up the bump stock ban, which that's got negative implications all around. Not to mention the fact that it's an unlawful ruling already, but then the fact that like it went down through an executive order. The fact that is somehow seen as okay, and they don't want to like put aside that it's guns. It could be Newports, right? It could be Newport cigarettes. Like you don't ban stuff like that through an executive order. Like for crying out loud, why is that not of a big enough deal for the Supreme Court to pick it up? And of course, we know old Clarence Thomas, man. He has scolded the rest of the judges for not picking stuff up. And that dude's starting to speak out, man. He's had my respect already, but doubly so now. He's like, yeah, you guys suck. It's like, I'm ashamed to be wearing the same kind of robes as you.
You know, what'll be really interesting is to see, first of all, I am praying that the justices live to hear the case. Like, I don't want someone accidentally dying or having a heart attack out of the blue, which nothing would surprise me at this point before they hear the New York concealed carry case.
Yeah. Or like dying of a heart attack underneath his pillow.
Right. Exactly. Accidentally drowning in his pool while he tripped.
And the family isn't going to get an autopsy because they don't think there was any wrongdoing.
Right. Yeah.
At least not any wrongdoing that they don't also want to happen to them.
I'm like, there's a long time between now and when they hear the case and then when the decision comes out. Right. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that could happen that could go down. Yeah. So my hope, everyone lives, it gets a fair shake. And of course, my hope is that it comes out in our favor. And basically says, no, you cannot stop people from carrying a gun. And then 8 states that are basically may issue states, California, New Jersey, New York, Hawaii. I don't even know what the rest of them are, probably Rhode Island. Hopefully they'll basically have to now issue carry permits, right? I mean, I'd love it for my friends that wouldn't be my family, none of them will carry, but my friends up in the San Francisco Bay Area, I'd love for them to be able to get a carry permit and have that little bit of peace of mind and safety and knowing that, hey, you know, something goes down, I can at least protect myself or at least have a shot instead of being a victim. But if it does go in our favor, I guarantee you they're going to go back to the Supreme Court packing. And they're going to go, all right, we're changing the amount of justices. We got to put more on there. We got Biden in office, soon to be Harris. I'm sure in the next, year or so, it'll be Harris president. And, let's get our Supreme Court justices in there.
See, I'm not sure they're going to make Harris president yet. Here's why. I think that they're playing the game of Biden seeming harmless because he's so old and disheveled. Like, he seems so weak that all the people handling him can do whatever they want. And it's like, oh, but this little old man can't hurt anybody. And whereas Kamala Harris, man, she's scary. People don't want to mess with her, right? But
they put her on the ticket, man. They put her as VP.
She's probably running things, but I'll bet she can get by with more, right? If she's under the guise of this old, soft little old man. I'm not sure. But either way, we know Biden's not running the country anyway. Clearly, the guy can't even put together a sentence. It's tragedy.
What I think back to when he was running and you had the best line. You're like, really, at this point, it's elder abuse.
Yeah.
Dying when you said that. Man.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I know I keep saying it, but we are in a really crazy time.
We are. I don't know who's gonna run for the Republicans. I've said this before, man. I really hope it's not Trump. I really hope. I can't stand that guy, and I don't want to see him literally just destroy what's left of the conservative side of the political parties. I mean, obviously, you and I have talked about this. I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, but I just don't want to. I mean, obviously, the only hope I have is in the Republicans. I have no hope in the Democrats at this point.
Exactly right, man. You're exactly right. Well, and I'm with you. I'm honestly, I don't know, 8-9 years ago, I gave up on our political process and just this is worthless. This is worthless. Maybe 7 years ago, I started being really serious about this is worthless. I went into the Trump Clinton run thinking yep, this is worthless. I don't want to have anything to do with either of these people. Well, then what ended up happening under Trump is okay, well, he did some things that were okay, some things that were wicked. I don't like the guy. And then I'm this is already screwed anyway. And so I thought, well, do whatever you can, vote however you can to try to hold back, but very little hope in it. Right. But I did have the thought that well, maybe, just maybe Trump will at least be the legitimate lesser of two evils. But then I'm like, even the guy, so I didn't like either of those guys, but that clearly wasn't a legitimate election. So I'm like, a guy like me is like, yeah, this is worthless. So like, I'm actually in a position where I'm like, I don't recognize the political process as legitimate here anymore. Not to mention beyond that, most of our laws are not constitutional anymore. So I'm like, well, I guess we can talk about this more later. I preached on this yesterday, but I'm at the point where I'm like, I'm barely hanging on to this being anything considered a legitimate government.
Well, what's interesting to me is I think if our schools actually taught the Constitution better, and specifically, what's in the Bill of Rights, and then, you could even look at the Federalist Papers and things like that. Like people are always like, well, we don't know exactly why they said this. No, we do. They didn't
exactly why.
They didn't write it in a vacuum. They wrote plenty of other papers going, this is why we're saying this. But to me, I keep looking at the 10th Amendment and I'm like, dude, this is one of the most important amendments we've got. And we've literally completely done away with it without repealing it. Basically it says anything that's not specifically given to the federal government, that power remains with the states and with the people, or with the people. I can't remember if it's an and or. And but you look at the FDA, the federal government does not have the power over the Food and Drug Administration, according to the Constitution. Therefore, it's illegal. It's unconstitutional. That power belongs to the states or to the people. You look at all of our drug laws. Our drug laws are all federal drug laws, I should say, are all unconstitutional because according to the 10th Amendment, that power remains with the states. And that's why right now we've got some states who are going, you know what, we're going to go be okay with weed for medical uses. We're going to be okay with weed for whatever you want. But again, and then you got Oregon who's like, hey, everything's cool with us. It's like that power does, according to the Constitution, belong to the states or to the people. And our feds are going, no, that power belongs to us.
This is where a guy like me that actually care about like epistemology, I care that we are consistent on things and I want to obey what is right. And so when we have things that don't even make sense, where we have this law contradicting that law and that law, when you trace back logically how things are supposed to be done constitutionally and things don't make sense, a guy like me just gives up and says like, well, this is stupid. It's not even real. Either it's consistent and I can say, okay, I'm going to obey here, or it's not. But as soon as the guy like me says, well, hey, this can't be legitimate because they're not abiding by the 10th Amendment, which is part of the Constitution, which is the law of the land. And when you bring up stuff like that, they're like, well, you're crazy. And I'm like, well, no, I'm actually trying to follow the law. Like people think that guys like me are just anarchists. And I'm not saying it hasn't been tempting at times, but because I'm like, sometimes that seems better than what we got. But I'm like, no, I'm actually trying to abide by our government as it's been designed. And I'm found out that I can't, that if I do try to abide by the law of the land, that's when I'm punished. Right. So anyway, that's
why don't you share a little bit about what you talked about yesterday?
So a lot of you guys know I'm a pastor. That's my primary job. I do other things too to help pay the bills, but I'm a pastor. And it so happens, like, I'm not to screw around about it or toot my own horn, but like, I am a legitimate pastor. I have a master's in philosophical theology. I've been pastoring for about the last 20 years. I'm a good chunk of the way through my PhD in theology. Like, I'm not just a bumpkin pastor who, gets all upset. Like, I do actual theology. I actually teach at an institution of higher learning that is accredited. And so when we're thinking through what is called the doctrine of the lesser magistrates, we've got to, as Christians, address this issue of how do we respond to tyranny? Because the truth was, from the very beginning, the very beginning of Christianity, it was to some degree illegal to be a Christian. You either were being oppressed by the Jewish religious leaders who were in bed with Rome, or soon after that, the Roman paganism in which the Christians would refuse to obey Caesar, or at least call him God, was leading to persecution there. And so it's always been a part of Christian history that we were in in disobedience to the government as it related to our religion, because it was always illegal. And even still, it's always been illegal somewhere. But within the United States, we've had relative freedom for the last couple of hundred years. And so nobody's been sitting down talking through, hey, here's where the lines are. And unfortunately, in the United States, people just kind of thrown out Romans 13. And they're like, Romans 13 says you're supposed to obey your governing authorities. And they just kind of throw that out. And I'm like, yeah, but you recognize like the Third Reich in Germany threw that out as a reason for people to murder Jews, right? Like it can't mean that. Romans 13 can't mean do whatever the government says. It can't. And when we look to scripture, we look to passages like, well, we look at the book of Daniel and Daniel chapter 1, chapter 3, chapter 6. They flagrantly disobey laws anytime it gets in the way of obeying Christ. We see this in the first century as well.
But Daniel could have just closed the curtains on his window. No one needed to know he was praying.
Yeah, or he could have just waited because it was only 30 days that he had to wait, right?
I mean, right.
Like it was only 4 weeks to flatten the curve. Right. He could have just waited. And I'm like, no, he went home that day and he flagrantly disobeyed the order. And so I always like to point to the fact that within scripture, there was so much that involved disobeying governing authorities anytime they were commanding something that was outside the law of God. And so when you look to Romans 13, it points out that like, hey, the whole point of Romans 13 is that ruling authority is there to administer God's law. It even describes what it's like, which means that if he's not doing that, he's outside of his role anyway. He's no longer doing what he's supposed to do. He's out of bounds. Whatever he's doing doesn't count. So what we did is we taught through yesterday how, in Matthew 28, 18 through 20, Jesus says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. So that means Jesus is king. Anybody else who has any kind of authority, they're getting it as a delegation from Christ. And they only are serving their role in so much as they're applying his commands. And so if they're trying to enforce something that is against God's law, man, it doesn't count. Like you disobey it. In fact, we're commanded to obey God rather than man. That's the quote from Acts 5:29. So we got into that yesterday. And you could actually go on the feed. I shared the link in our Telegram yesterday for the sermon. We go into just the theological framework that allows us to think through this. And then I recommended 2 books. One was Vindicae contra Tyrannus, which we've mentioned here before, as well as Slaying Leviathan. The truth is, for the last 2,000 years, Christians have had a really great understanding of not just when to disobey civilly, but sometimes uncivilly. And we just haven't been thinking through it. And unfortunately, pastors have dropped the ball. They haven't been teaching on this. And so take some time, study up on this, those of you who are brothers in Christ. And honestly, if you're not a brother in Christ, it's still worth looking into this, because all of Western society's freedom is built on these principles, which are biblical principles. So anyway, that was my thoughts on trying to get the church ready for civil or maybe uncivil disobedience to tyrants.
Love it.
Yeah, but that was yesterday. And you know what? I had no negative pushback from the sermon yesterday. Everybody was with me.
I got a feeling that people who go to your church kind of know where you stand on these things. Yeah, I mean, you do have a gun podcast.
I do have a gun. Not everybody in my church knows about the gun podcast, though. It's interesting, but yes. Yeah.
What's funny is one of my Travis, you know who Travis is.
Oh, yeah.
My old assistant, literally best guy I've ever hired in my life.
Yeah.
Not just nice, but he's freaking competent. Do you know how hard that is to find? Oh, dude, it sucked when I had to let him go. And that wasn't his fault. It was literally the business was drying up. And I was like, all right, got to make some changes here.
Yep.
But anyway, he was telling me via Voxer, because we were talking about some other stuff, that he listens to this podcast. I'm like, you listen, but you're not a gun guy. And he goes, no, and I'll probably never own one. I believe in it. And he like went into like his whole theory on it, and him being a pastor as well. He's like, I there have been times when I used to carry a knife, and I literally would go to these bad places, and I wouldn't carry a knife when I went there because as a pastor, I wanted to take a different stance. Almost like how you've said when you've gone different places, you're like, I'm not going to carry a gun here. I'm just not going to do it. And that was more having to do with you being a pastor and and that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But it was interesting, man. He listens to the podcast.
That's awesome. You know, we've got another friend on the podcast who is not a gun guy at all, supportive, but not a gun guy. He says he'll probably never buy a gun, but he's really supportive. I'm like, that's kind of cool. But I'm also like, hey, if you're listening, come on, you kind of want to buy one, don't you?
Yeah, right. That's what I was like. I was telling Travis, I'm like, dude, it's actually really fun. Like,
fun,
and he goes, I know. I'm afraid I would start liking it too much, and it's too expensive of a hobby to have. And I'm like, well, right now, sure, ammo is really expensive.
I do understand that, man. I do, but man, it's, you know what though? Maybe this is probably bad theology, what I'm about to say.
But by the way, he did say this. He goes, really, what I listened to the podcast for is the tinfoil hat stuff.
Oh, we should. You know what? We haven't talked enough about the tinfoil hat stuff.
We haven't. We really
need to bring some stuff in.
One of the things that we discussed, guys, and I'd love to get your opinion on this. Message us on Facebook or whatever. Is Dan and I talked about going through the WikiLeaks, because everything's on WikiLeaks, right? Of all the different stuff that they've released over the years, and like going through some of those government documents that have been released, and just kind of like, hey, here's some government documents. Here's what they actually did. Here's what they actually said. Because we don't hear about it much. Like, you hear about the whole big leak, once it first happens, and then that's it.
Yeah. Well, and there's so much data to sift through on those. And also it has to be quantified. That there's some of this where it's like, that was really crazy illegal, but people don't realize the context of it and why them saying this thing at this time, what the implications were, or who it was said to. There's so much crazy stuff like that, but honestly, we're in a time where people don't seem to be shocked. They're just like, oh, whatever.
Yeah.
Like when CNN, did you see the Project Veritas video?
Yes.
CNN director who's just admitting to propaganda and deceit and intentionally influencing the election and like just laughing all the way to the bank about it. That gets released and it's just, there it is. And nothing. Nobody's.
I think what it was is everybody knew that CNN was biased.
Yeah.
And it was almost like, okay, so yeah, now you guys admit it. Okay, it's just weird hearing you guys admit it, but we kind of already knew that. I think that's kind of what it was.
Yeah. Which somehow that reminded me of a Grand Thumb video we need to talk about. That's totally unrelated. Actually, that didn't remind me. Anyway, no, you're exactly right. There's all this stuff out there. Though it would be great if we could get somebody to sift through all of the stuff for us and give us some comments from WikiLeaks.
Dude, we need some assistance for this podcast.
We do, man. We need research assistance.
There you go.
Yeah.
Give us the highlights. Give us the highlights to talk about.
As we're finding out, though, man, we can expose whatever we want. And unfortunately, so many people have just been conditioned to do what they're told. I find it funny. Literally every week when you and I try to broadcast on our Facebook page, we've now been blocked. We never had that. And I don't have that problem with my other podcasts. Yeah. It's literally this podcast. Only this podcast.
Well, I can only broadcast it to my feed, my personal feed.
Not only can we not broadcast directly to the feed, but now when you broadcast it to your personal feed and we try to share it on the From Concealment podcast page, it won't let us do it.
Right. I'm going to try today to take the recording of this and put it on our page and see if it'll let it go up. I don't know if it will.
Well, have you seen the thing where guys are sharing like just gross videos or like videos of something dumb like paint drying but like calling it like how to make a bomb 101? And they're like, so then the FBI director has to just be bored for like 20 hours watching
the whole video. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, so today got some big news. Well, big-ish. So I pulled the trigger, so to speak, on my Glock 26. I got the RMR cut slide coming in today.
Nice.
And then because I got these gift cards that I've had for who knows how long to this, we got a local place here called Rifle Gear, who I used to go there all the time. And then COVID happened, and then it was like by appointment only. And it, literally, if you look on their website, which is always up to date, and you look on California compliant handguns, show me all of them that you got. There's 4. That's the only guns they got. And they're like a 22 revolver, like just
oh dear,
guns you would never actually buy, right? Not unless you're just completely bored out of your mind. And but anyway, they got some Hollow Suns 507Cs, which is what I've got on my Glock 17.
It's what I have on my AR pistol. Yes.
Oh, you got the 507C on your AR pistol?
Oh, not 507. I'm sorry.
You got it. Yeah, you got the different Hollow Sun. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I said that wrong. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. So I've got one on my Glock 17, and I've got a regular Trijicon RMR on my Glock 19. But because I got those gift cards, I'm like, dude, I'm putting that sucker on my 26, because I would rather carry the 26. It's got such a smaller profile when I'm concealed carrying. I mean, I usually carry my Glock 19 and just don't give a rip if anybody is like, hey, what's that bulge sticking out over on his side? But I'm like, dude, if I could carry the Glock 26, and I would if I had the RMR on it, like, all right. So that's the game plan.
That's awesome, man. So first of all, that's awesome. Second of all, speaking of like smaller profile on a gun reminded me. So I'm a huskier than I was 2 years ago. Right.
How old are you?
I'm 40. I just now turned 40.
Okay.
And so I don't know what it is, whatever. It's and
I just like to point out I'm actually skinnier than I was 2 years ago, but
good for you.
That was by design.
Yes. This is too. Just so here's the thing though. I buy a bigger carry gun, and I've always worn fitted t-shirts, right? And I'm still all right, but like they actually fit better now, but don't have a protection to cover my gun when I'm appendix carrying. Right. So I'm at this thing. I'm taking my kid to T-ball, and then I'm going bowling with my buddy and his kids and my friend while our wives are at this like thing. And so I'm bowling, whatever, and I take off my hoodie. And immediately my buddy looks at me, and I can see he's looking at my concealed carry because I'm printing like a Xerox machine. And he's like, and I just see his face, and I'm like, yeah, I'm probably showing, but it was too hot in there. And I'm like, it's kind of dark. And he's a fellow.
You know what you should have just said? You should have just looked at him and said, it's a hernia.
Right. Of course,
it's a hernia.
He knows it's my gun because he carries also. So we bowl a little while, and another friend of mine comes in, gives me a hug, and as soon as I hug him, I'm like, "Oh no, he can tell that I'm carrying because my gun's right there." I'm sure he.
Dude, what's funny is when you go to hug somebody, and your guns bump, like each of you, it's like the metal on metal.
It's like friendship. So anyway, my buddy was like, yeah, man, you're a printing fool, son. And I'm like, yep. So I just started carrying my wife's Smith & Wesson Bodyguard recently because it is so tiny. Oh my goodness. So I'm realizing summertime, I think I'm just going to have to carry that more because the Walther is still pretty narrow, but man, when I have this gigantic belt buckle, like it just, everything prints. It's just a wreck. So anyway, changing that up. But hey, I have something fun that's worth talking about, but I didn't want to jump on.
Let's hear it. No, let's hear it.
So, have you guys, I know we talk about Garand Thumb every now and then. His videos are just fun. They tend to be informative. They tend to be helpful, but also can be kind of funny. So he did a video not long ago where he wears a lab coat and has these ridiculous like wraparound sunglasses, and he calls it Dr. Garand Thumb. But he was doing testing with ballistic skulls. And have you seen these ballistic skulls where it's not just ballistic gel? Like they've got built in, like blood and a cranial skull. Like, I mean, it gets a pretty solid testing of what a bullet will do. And he was testing the whole theory that we've all heard that like, what makes a 22 deadly is a headshot that bounces around in the skull. And he's like, probably an old wives' tale. Let's test it. And just for clarification, I'm pretty sure he said he was testing with CCI Stingers, which is about the hottest 22 round you can get. There's a lot of juice on that for a 22. He stands at 7 yards with a little, I don't know if he had a Glock 44, whatever it is with the, that shoots 22. I can't remember which Glock it is that does the 22. Anyway, 7 yards away, and that thing penetrated right through the skull. Did a good job. And he's like, you know what? I'm kind of surprised, but that kind of did what it needed to do. Well, then he takes a Ruger 1022, loads that up, stands it however long. And that thing not only penetrated, but had an exit wound as big as a quarter. And he's like, oh my gosh. Now, CCI stingers, right? So it's not like he's just firing whatever subsonic thunderbolts or whatever. But he said, you know what, man, I would not carry a 22 caliber because, you know, the reliability and whatever. But he's like, this worked as a defensive round. He's like, what he came to is he's like, if that's all you got, aim for the eyes. But it was surprising how well that did. Now, what made it really cool is he did the same test with a 9mm, and that thing just blew the thing's skull up. And then 5.56, and the 5.56 just, you know, there was hardly any skull left. But it was really interesting. All that said, first of all, it's a really interesting video from a ballistics perspective to kind of see, okay, this is what my carry caliber would do. Great video, but was surprising. It actually moved my 22 out of the category of completely worthless for defense into a, you know what? If this was all I had, I'd use it. And it also put me in the thought of like, okay, if I needed my kids to defend themselves and they were the last line after I'd already been, I would be like, you know what? I'll have my daughter rocking the 10-22 shooting at the eyes. She might be able to stop some bad guys that way. So anyway, great video, a lot of fun. He wears a lab coat, being silly, but I would say it was worthwhile from a knowledge perspective. Learned some good things watching that video. Yeah.
That's really awesome. I actually just got invited yesterday, first time ever, to go hunting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I've been telling you, right? That's a skill set I want to learn. I have no desire to kill anything, but I want to learn it. So you kind of got to, it's kind of what you do.
Yeah.
And so, you know, he was telling me, all right, this is what we got to do to get you all licensed in California and blah, 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 blah. And,
that's the first in California reference, by the way, for all of you guys playing the drinking game.
All playing the drinking game. Yep.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No. So I'm actually kind of, but then it got me thinking, all right, well, now if I'm out hunting, okay, sure, you know, maybe I've got, like, if we go bird hunting, which is what they do over Thanksgiving weekend, I'm like, okay, so I'm taking my 12 gauge with bird shot, but I still want to carry something with some more power. So I'm like, what do I take? Do I take my 45, you know, with the hollow points on it? And maybe that's what I sport as, you know, the just in case a bear comes running or whatever. Or then it's my mind starts going, I'm like, well, shoot, man, if I'm going to go hunting, I really should have myself a good 10mm. You know, I gotta add to the collection. I gotta add to the collection. So the problem is we can't find anything in California right now, but I gotta wait until someone's got a Glock 20 SF or something like that, so I can get a 10mm added to the collection.
Yeah, my buddy's rocking one of those 10mm Glocks. And he was.
Does he do that for his carry?
My understanding is he was trying. So
it goes through 3 people at once.
Yeah, my understanding is he was trying to save money by getting a utility gun that he could use for a lot of things. So he got a long barrel that he could put in it to do, and his idea was to do hog hunting with it. But then he could use it for home defense. I forget what all he was going to do with it, but. Man, I doubt he's carrying that thing as his conceal, but if he is, man, he's got my respect. Like, I don't even know how you conceal that monster. It is a tank. So, well,
it depends on, the 20SF is a short frame, so it's actually not, it's doable, right? It's totally doable. I think it's the Glock 40 that's like the full size frame and just, you know. Yeah, it's like carrying a Glock 34. It's just huge, except thicker, you know.
Awesome.
So that's what I got to add to the collection. Anybody's got a hookup on a Glock 20 SF, man, let me know, or even a Glock 40 for that matter. I'm looking for a 10mm, preferably Glock, since that's primarily what I shoot. And if it's from out of state, then I got to find myself a Gen 3. So you got to find a Gen 3 for me and hook me up. That I could have transferred inside California.
Oh, man.
Oh, there. Second in California. Oh, third.
Yep. Oh, it breaks my heart every time you have to go through all that stuff, man.
I know, right?
Yeah, it would break it just makes my heart sad for you, brother. Yeah. Don't worry. A day is coming where it's just not going to matter. We're all going to drill the third holes. We're all going to be.
It's not going to be pistol braces anymore. It's going to be the stock, a full stock.
We're coming so close to that time. We're like, it's just not even going to matter. So do what you want. Do what you want. Actually, and overwhelm them so that they can't even enforce it all. Now, don't do that yet. It's not time for that. But the day is coming. Let's just face that fact. And it's going to be super entertaining. Actually, you're just going to have to just cross a line into another, state where they're not going to allow the enforcement of the federal law. That's probably what it's coming to. But
yeah, but you still have federal agencies in those states, and they will enforce the federal laws.
Well, here's the beauty. This is yes, that can happen, but we get the states starting to really shake things up like we're hoping they will. We'll see. We have like Missouri that's like, we're not going to allow you to enforce this. Well, then, county sheriff can say like, oh, Mr. ATF agent, you're not allowed to do that. And so the ATF agent ends up in jail for trying to enforce. It could get so spicy.
It could. It'd be interesting to see what happens, man. Yeah. I obviously I agree with that.
I will acknowledge that I think the likelihood is unlikely right now. But as things heat up, we got to look at like the more that the federal level pushes, the more the states are saying, and we're getting the states used to saying no to the feds. And once you've opened up that whole thing and they start thinking in that, it's like the guy who becomes libertarian and all of a sudden he starts thinking libertarian and he's like, why were we doing that? I can't believe I did that. That's terrible. And so if we can get that happening at the state level, I mean, honestly, like what's coming is going to be a civil war if that happens, or at the very least, an acrimonious divorce between state and federal. But we're starting down a path that we just could end up landing places on.
Yeah.
Keep that. But yeah, man. So that's today.
And remember, everybody, buy your 80%ers now.
Yeah.
Because in a couple of weeks, they might be gone.
Yeah. Oh, so Pete, I've got an update on that I'm going to try because I screwed up my hybrid 80.
Yeah.
This week I was talking about that. I'm having a conversation with somebody who has a solution, and that I'm going to try. And I'll let all you guys know how it goes. But let's just say we're going to try something. We're going to try to see if we can bring it back. And it'll be a feat akin to re-freedoming California. But if we can do it, we'll do it.
Yeah, I picked up another 80%er. I stuck it in the Telegram group. I picked up an AR9 80%er.
Yeah.
But I don't have to register it with California until I drill it out. And I'm not drilling that sucker out until I get everything else. I need a barrel. I need the complete upper. I need the bolt carrier group. I need it all. So, whenever I get that, then I'll think about registering it because then I'll drill it out. But until then, it's just a hunk of metal.
Yep.
I like that.
That's all we need. Well, and really, even when it is drilled out, it is just a hunk of metal, just in a very specific shape.
Yeah, I know, right?
That can accidentally happen.
Right? I'm kind of wondering, though. I was thinking about this. I was like, should I leave it as an AR9 or should I make it a 40 cal?
Oh. Because
I got a lot of 40 cal ammo. Because I used to shoot a 40 cal and I don't anymore. And I'm like, this might be kind of fun. Might be kind of fun in a pistol scenario, an AR pistol scenario.
That would be cool and kind of unique. Like almost everybody does those in 9. So that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
I'm down with that.
I don't know.
Speaking of similar things, I know we're running out of time, but I think my next one, maybe I already mentioned this. I think my next thing is I'm gonna pick up a Glock and a micro Roni. I haven't gotten a micro Roni yet, and I think I can check the box of one more sidearm because my wife really needs a sidearm, like a legit sidearm, not a concealed carry. One more sidearm that also functions as your close quarter combat, carbine, so to speak. And so I'm kind of excited about that. I think I can check another box there, 2 birds, 1 stone, not crazy expensive, and fill a gap that honestly, like my wife, I think would do well with a 9mm micro Roni. And yeah, by the time I bought the Glock and the micro and put an RMR on it, I'm still probably under $1,000 for the whole thing.
Yeah, no, that'd be nice. Like I said before, man, I really want to get a micro Roni. It's just, we got the whole stupid laws here in California. So It's dicey. That's all I'm going to say is it's dicey.
Actually, that just gets me thinking. We were talking about my buddy that had the extended barrel on his 10 millimeter Glock. That gets me thinking, like, I bet you could put one of those extended barrel Glocks in one of those micro Ronies. And then you have, I'm trying to think if it shifts up in the, well, then you could, I mean, he had like a 10-inch barrel on that thing.
What?
Then, yeah, it was a monster. Like, it's sticking out that far from the thing.
Whoa.
I mean, that was his thing for boar hunting.
Right.
Which awesome. But I'm thinking through, like, you could really turn that micro Roni into a pretty legitimate fighting weapon. That might be more trouble than it's worth, but all very intriguing to me. Anyway, neither here nor there. I'm thinking out loud.
We got a guy who just Facebooked in. He said, LOL, the closed captioning keeps spelling macaroni instead of macaroni.
That's awesome. That'll be our cover. We'll be like, well, sir, officer, this is my
macaroni.
That's awesome. Oh, good stuff, man. Well, my very last thing, I don't know if you had anything else. I got a gift from a friend recently that is just meaningful. Pastor friend who's former operative that he's done some work for our nation, and gifted me one of his mags that he used in service, and it was really meaningful. Like, wrote a really cool note. And so just wanted to say, I know we joke around about a lot of stuff on here, but man, we've got a few veterans that listen in and a few really faithful ones. And I recognize that a lot of you guys have paid some serious prices for the freedoms that we really are trying to preserve and talk about on this show. So a big thanks. That was a very meaningful gift from a brother whose name we'll keep. Probably for his good, we'll just call him Pastor for right now. That might be his call sign on here. So Pastor, we appreciate it. That was very meaningful, and we'll do our best to honor you by fighting for freedom with our words, because you fought for freedom with actual bullets. So anyway, that was my little comment for today, and yeah, that's all I got.
That's awesome. A buddy of mine, I think he was one of my groomsmen. I don't know, it's hard to remember. That's over 20 years ago, right? But it was interesting. We were friends in college. We lived in the same house, and he had been a Navy SEAL. He was SEAL Team 5, and then he went to the same college I went to, which is Biola, on the GI Bill. And so when he was active duty, we weren't at war, right? So. Right. It was funny because when we would talk, he'd go, well, everything I did was a training mission because we haven't been at war. And you were always like, what does he mean by that? Right. But
it's like, we weren't in Cambodia. What?
It was a training mission. That's all it was.
Lost maybe once or twice.
But he, by the way, he was without a doubt one of the strongest Christians I ever knew and had probably the biggest influence on me. And part of the reason why he was such a strong Christian was because of where he was and what he was doing. I mean, he's Navy SEALs with all the Navy SEAL guys. And it was like he had to decide, am I going to be a real Christian or not? Right. And but he was telling me, and I remember this clearly, that when he first became a SEAL, one of his mentors, some guy who'd been a SEAL for a while, I don't know if the guy was leaving the teams or what he was doing, but he gave him his knife that he had used.
Oh, wow.
And he was like, kind of like you, where it was like, it had like this huge significance to him. Like, this is the knife you carried when we went on training missions. Right? Yeah. I mean, and, but it had a really blood. I don't know, this reddish brown gunk stuck in the
that's right.
But yeah, he was saying the same thing, man. It had a huge impact on him.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a piece of history, man. And I think about, like, there's a limited number of those that he would have used. He's like, it was discharged on 3 separate continents. And so that gets me thinking a lot of places, but like it's just a cool thing. It's meaningful. It says something. It might not have been discharged. It was used in 3 different continents, but either way, like those kind of things are meaningful. And I like having little pieces of history like that. And honestly, as men, those kind of things tie us together, and it's just kind of cool. So appreciate it. We're just going to say a thank you to Call Sign Pastor. Appreciate it. We assign that to you. I recognize that's not your chosen one. So if you want to change it, let us know. But appreciate you guys, and appreciate the Freedom Nation, man. I recognize we're joking around. We screw around on here, but we all listen to this podcast and talk about it because we really care about freedom. And that itself is an act of defiance against tyranny that means something. So we can't claim that we're fighting that hard here, but this is meaningful. So thanks for being a part of this, everybody. Freedom Nation, you're doing a good work just by listening.
Cool. Hey, why don't you give Lake Erie their plug?
Yes. All right. So learms.net. If you get the chance, jump on, everybody. Lake Erie Arms is expanding the kind of stuff that we are offering, both online and in training, and we keep stock. So you get down to the store, we've got stuff. Let me just tell you, we're talking about this a lot. It's still true. They are doing everything they can to take our guns away. Buy guns while you can. So get down to Lake Erie Arms in Huron, Ohio. Buy everything you can. Build everything you can. This is one of the few times that even as a pastor, I would say, maybe don't be in such a hurry to pay down debt. Make sure you get all your guns taken care of so you're ready for what's coming. I'm serious about that. I was aggressively paying down debt, and I'm like, well, we're going to take a couple of months break so we can buy some more guns and be ready for when the fecal matter hits the ceiling turbine. That's all we got. Check out learms.net.
Cool. All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be back next week. We obviously won't be back on our Facebook page as Zuck has stopped our podcast from airing there, but we'll always be back on, well, I shouldn't say always, right now until Apple figures out what our podcast is all about. We'll be in iTunes.
All the more reason, by the way, everybody, to get on the Telegram, because we can communicate with you on there. I mean, we seriously might have to start just sending files through there for you to listen to, but we will do whatever it takes.
And the way that you can join our Telegram group, text HERO, HERO, to 850-990-2020, 850-990-2020, keyword HERO, just send it right there. It's going to walk you through. It's going to ask for your email. So in case they, screw up our Telegram group, which wouldn't surprise me, if we got a way to communicate with you, we're going to use it. But that's how you can get on it. And that's also where we post our memes because Dan and I are addicted to memes and we just like to share them. So
memes are the manna of freedom.
That's right. All that's going to be in the show notes. So if you haven't done it, do it now. Join the Telegram group. And we'll be back next week. All right, guys, take care.
Take care.
You've been listening to the From Concealment podcast with Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams. Be sure to tune in next week for more gun talk. Also, check out the From Concealment website for more shooting-related goodness at FromConcealment.com.